Hello viewers, welcome to the session. Today we are going to discuss different theories of language learning. Before that, we will discuss certain terms like approach, method and technique. What is an approach? It refers to how we view things, and it establishes a relation between theory and practice in language teaching. For example, behaviorist approach believes in drills and substitution tables. On the other hand, constructivistic approach is output based and believes in integration of language skills. And what is a method? A method is a plan that we follow in classroom teaching. It includes the procedures, practices, steps in teaching and outline of actions that we have to perform in the classroom. Some examples are inductive method, deductive method, situational method and project method. And a technique, it is a strategy, and a technique is purely personal and highly individual, and it differs from teacher to teacher, and the teacher can adopt his or her technique to perform in the classroom so as to cater to the needs of the children in a better way. Some examples for techniques are language games, activities and puzzles, and use of blackboard, reading the lesson and illustrating a point are also examples of techniques. So, an approach is a belief, a method is a plan and a technique is a strategy. In the history of English language learning, we have come across different theories, and we just cannot say which is the best method or which is the best approach. But here we are going to discuss a few very important methods. The first one is grammar translation method, popularly known as GTM. The term itself suggests that translation is the best way to learn a language. And it's believed that literature should be focused, and the students in the classroom were given tasks of translating literature into the target language. The study of the target culture, and the focus is on reading and writing, and the aim is successful translation. It's not communication. Learning is facilitated through attention to similarities between the native language and the target language, and focus is on explicit grammar, and the learners are expected to acquire rules of language. And teacher is the ultimate authority, and evaluation is done by means of written tests, and we have already stated that teacher is the ultimate authority and the teacher supplies correct answers. Grammar translation method has its limitations. The first one is there is little scope for the creativity of the learners. The teacher controls the classroom, the teacher assigns the tasks, the learners have to translate the literature into the target language, and the teacher is the authority, and learners remain passive and learning is monotonous. Since the focus is on reading and writing, the primary skills, listening and speaking, are totally ignored, and there is no scope for authentic communication. Every point the teacher controls the class, the teacher determines the classroom procedure, and the learners have to work like machines. Due to the limitations of grammar translation method, another method has come into the limelight, which is direct method. The term itself suggests that exposure to natural language and no translation is allowed and no native language is used. Only one language, the target language, is used. It establishes bonds between thought and expression, experience and language. And the focus is on communication, keeping the native language far away. And grammar follows language use. So the use of language is paramount in this method. Grammar comes later. And the teacher has to demonstrate, not translate or explain. And the teacher has freedom to use realia or authentic materials. An example of direct method classroom is, in the classroom, the child has come out with the word 𝗧𝗧 and the child has not understood the word. The child comes to the teacher for explanation. The teacher does not explain or demonstrate, rather the teacher uses a realia or a picture of 𝗧𝗧 or an image and shows it to the learner. And the learner understands by interpreting the picture. This is an example for direct method. When we go to grammar translation method, every time the target language is associated with the natural language. Every time there is a shift from natural language to target language. So when we come to direct method, the target language is superior. And in direct method, language is believed to be speech at the primary level. So the focus is on oral skills. Pronunciation and conversation are given importance. And learners are expected to use language in different contexts. And here grammar is implicit. Learners are expected to be the good language practitioners. They need not by heart the rules of grammar. And vocabulary is emphasized. And evaluation is done by means of learners' use of language, conversation practice, dictation, map drawing, and paragraph writing. So we all know that dictation is a very important activity in which many language skills are integrated: listening, reading, and even writing. Similarly, while drawing a map, the learners follow the instructions of the teacher and they act accordingly. And even in paragraph writing, the learners use their thoughts and ideas and they try to organize them in the proper way. And correction. In grammar translation method, the teacher is the ultimate. The teacher has authority to correct, whereas in direct method, there is scope for self-correction. Of course, the teacher may facilitate, the teacher may show the learner where it needs correction, but ultimately the learner has to take up self-correction. That's why direct method is expected to be the better one, and it has been in practice for many years. In the earlier days, grammar translation method or GTM was in the limelight and it was practiced for so many years. Rather, when the real purpose of language is known to the learners, the system has changed and there is a shift from grammar translation method to direct method. When behavioristic approach has entered, it was believed that learning is change in behavior. Accordingly, it has its implications on language learning. So, structural approach has come into the limelight and it is the outcome of behaviorism, and it's believed that the learners have to gain mastery over structures, and the focus is on pattern practice and oral drills, and the structures are selected and graded. And we have observed this in our textbooks which have been in use for many years. The structures are selected. So if you see the textbooks from class 1 to class 10, the basic structures are introduced at the early level and the complex structures are introduced at later level. And the learners are expected to produce similar sentences using the same structures. And the use of substitution tables. Certain elements are arranged in the table and the learners are expected to produce more and more sentences using the same pattern. and guided composition. As far as writing is concerned, the learners are given some inputs and the learners have to follow the same structure in guided composition. So, structural approach was popular for so many years. Then there was a shift. Learning was not considered changing behavior, and learning is insight formation from cognitivistic point of view. Accordingly, theory of language shifted from structural approach to the other one, and when the audio-lingual method came into the limelight, and language learning is a process of habit formation and errors should be prevented, and use of chain drills, response to verbal and non-verbal stimuli transformation, question and answer, minimal pairs, grammar games, dialogue completion. The student should answer automatically without stopping to think, and the teacher should direct and control the classroom process. And the other method is the audio-lingual method. In the lingual method, the focus is on mastery of sound system and grammatical patterns. Natural order of skills is considered: listening, followed by speaking, followed by reading and writing. And evaluation is done by means of formal tests, and discrete test items are evaluated and errors are avoided. Communicative language teaching, which is popularly known as CLT, which is the outcome of cognitivistic approach to language learning. Language learning or even learning is not habit formation, it is insight formation, and accordingly the shift is on communicative language teaching, and it is believed that language has to be used in real life contexts. Language should not be confined to structures or even elements, and the focus is on the process of communication, how the learner takes up communication and how the learner uses language in various contexts. And language is practiced at discourse level. Discrete elements have nothing to do. The focus is on discourse and coherence and cohesion. So, while presenting a discourse, the learners have to see the unity of thoughts and they have to link the ideas using cohesive devices. And students are given opportunity to express their ideas and opinions. And we have seen so many information gap activities and opinion gap activities in a CLT classroom. At every level, the learners are free to use language in authentic communication. And earlier methods have strictly prohibited errors, whereas CLT tolerates errors because there is no learning without errors. So, the learners have freedom to make errors, and every time errors are corrected individually or in groups, and the teacher never comes out with the right version of language. And peer correction is given prominence, and teacher's role is shifted as an authority into a facilitator. The teacher creates an atmosphere for language learning, and the learners are free to learn language at their disposal, and whenever they have a problem, teacher acts as facilitator and he attempts or he helps the learners to solve their problem. It does not mean that teacher guides or controls the classroom, the teacher facilitates the process. Whereas direct method strictly prohibited the use of mother tongue, communicative language teaching tolerates mother tongue. You cannot say that natural language or even first language has to be banned. It can be used, but judiciously. When time permits, when there is a need, mother tongue or native language can be used. And evaluation is not done by means of discrete elements. Evaluation focuses on the holistic use of language, and it is integrated like a conversation, letter writing, real communication. And the learners have to be good language practitioners, and the purpose of language is communication. Communication in oral mode as written mode. But finally, the aim of language is to communicate in various contexts, which is the outcome of CLT or communicative language teaching. And we have seen so many puzzles and even word games or word ladders and even conversation gap practice activities in a CLT classroom. The learners are given a situation and they come out with their answers, and they develop a conversation, or they come out with a discourse, they write a description, or they make a speech, and there will be a possible role play which is also possible in a CLT classroom. And there are other methods. Dr. West's new method, in which general service list was used, and the silent way which focuses on discovery of language or even problem solving of language, and bilingual method, in which both the natural language and the target language are used hand in hand, and constructivistic approach, which is the outcome of Jean Piaget theory. So, constructivistic approach, now it is followed in the present curriculum, and we all know that the learners have to construct their language, and there will be a trigger in the class, and the learners come out with discourses, and they come out with their ideas, and editing is very important in constructivistic classroom. The teacher gives a hint, the teacher targets, or the teacher gives a trigger in the classroom, and the learners work with the language, the learners take up their activities, and the learners present in the classroom, and correction is generally done individually or as well as in peers, and the teacher ultimately presents his or her version, and he never dictates, he never identifies the errors of the learners, rather he presents one way of answering a task, and the learners, they make a comparison between their work and the teacher's work, and they make necessary corrections, and they come out with the right version. So, the learner's draft is reformulated further. The teacher gives a literary text in the natural language, and the teacher asks the learners to read the text, and the teacher asks them to find equivalents for the terms, and the learners are expected to translate it into the target language, and finally the teacher evaluates the works of the learners and how best they are able to translate. The goal of grammar translation method is to make the learners good translators of language. And in direct method, the target is on authentic or accurate practice of language. Since natural language or the mother tongue is kept away, direct method is free from the inhibitions, it is free from the barriers of mother tongue, and the learners can keep all the mother tongue habits aside. They can come out with good presentations in the target language, and the teacher uses realia, where the association between the thought and the target language is made, and which is really quite welcoming. And when learners follow the instructions of the teacher and they process the information and they acquire the language and they respond to the instructions of the teacher and they do the task. And in dictation, the learners listen to the teacher, and the learners try to process the utterances, and the learners associate the phonemes with the letters, and the learners write the words or even sentences. So, dictation is a good example for integration of skills, which is very important in direct method. And in structural approach, we have seen so many structures. For example, at the basic level, we have seen structures like subject plus verb plus complement. We have seen in our old textbooks like subject, verb, complement. The earth is round. This book is good. The ball is round. The table is flat. So, in all these cases, the common structure is underlying subject, verb and complement. Similarly, we are familiar with so many structures like to, so that. So, this tea is too hot to drink, or this table is too heavy to lift, and he is too old to walk. So, these are very common structures. We have seen them in all textbooks. But the problem with structural approach is the learners may not come out of the particular structure, and there is very little scope for creativity. and we cannot even change the word order, we cannot come out with a new sentence or new utterance. That is a problem. And in audio-lingual method, the focus is on pronunciation. So, the learners acquire good speech habits in audio-lingual method and they present language in the most authentic way. And in CLT, which has been famous for many years, the spoken form of language and the communication is given prominence in CLT classroom, and the learners are good communicators and the learners take up role plays, the learners take up conversations and they make their presentations in the classroom. And unlike other methods, CLT invites learners' errors and learners' errors are tolerated. So, at a later level the learners will correct their errors. For example, in a class the learners may come out with certain expressions like good or even cutted. So, in the class the teacher may ask, okay, where did Sita go? And one of the students may answer, Sita go to her village. So, the teacher says, oh, Sita went to her village. And the child thinks about it. Okay, I said goat and the teacher said went. So, I should not use goat and rather I should use went. So, at the next level the learner will use the word went instead of goat. Of course, goat is an error, but it is tolerated when the teacher gave the right version, the learner has replaced the incorrect version with the right one. So, this is the process. Similarly, cutted. So, if the learner says cutted, the teacher says cut. So, the learner processes. So, cutted should not be used and it should be used cut. And even sometimes there will be some experimentation. The learners will come out with so many words like sheeps and children's. So, these are tolerated when the teacher gives the right version, that the learner processes the right information. This happens in CLT classroom. And when you come to pair drills or even information gap activities, some information is with one student and the remaining information with the other one, and with communication they complete the information. This happens in CLT. And whereas in constructivistic approach, the learners, they take up language at discourse level and they present language in discourse, and when they do the draft they present in the classroom, and there will be individual editing and classroom editing. So, the teacher asks the learners or the teacher shows the areas where editing is required. So, this is also the right method. Here the learner processes the right version of language. So, dear viewers, in this session we have discussed some important methods of language teaching, and we cannot say which is the best method. Every method is important, every method is the best one according to the context. What was popular many years ago and what is popular now, we cannot say. Rather, how our approach to language changes, how language is understood in a different way, the method or our treatment of language also needs some change. Every method is good, every method is proper, and we have to choose the best method, and we have our own approaches, we have our own methods and even techniques. The ultimate thing is the learners have to be good language communicators. That's all for us today. Have a nice day.